of community. There will be moments throughout the meeting where you may not be allowed to speak, but that doesn't mean that you should get off the phone. You should continue to participate. And if there's an opportunity where we have open session, there'll be an opportunity for you to participate. I remind everyone that this meeting is being recorded and that this will then be used as public record that will go out to open view for anyone as per the city charter and the open meeting law. With that, I want to introduce the officers, and we have our first vice chair, I should say, Leonard Jordan, who's not on the call at the moment. We have Barbara Zala-Gringer, who's our second vice chair, and then we have Jessica Thurston, who serves as our secretary. So with that, I'll entertain a motion to adopt the agenda for this evening. I have a motion by Mr. Gordon and a second by Ms. Zala-Gringer. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, please indicate being in favor by raising your hand or acknowledging by aye. Anyone opposed, please follow the same protocol. Any abstentions, please follow the same protocol. Hearing none, has everyone had a chance to review the executive committee minutes from February 2022? Are there any noted additions, modifications, or corrections? Hearing none, all in favor, either raise your hand or indicate aye. Opposed, please follow the same protocol. Anyone abstaining, please follow the same protocol. Should you have any corrections later on, please feel free to submit them to the board office. Thank you. Here's what we, as you've all been learning, we've been trying to get right with the recommendations from the controller's office as per the most recent audit. And here's where we have an opportunity for the public to give us an agenda item or have a topic be brought before the exec committee that may not be on the agenda at this time. And so I would ask that any members who are not members of the executive committee, if you have an item or you're a member of the public that you want to have us focus on for this portion of the meeting, please speak and do so now. Mr. Du?
No, I always have an item.
It's all right.
Chair Singletary, this Saturday we are having the meeting on the closing of the Gates Avenue slip between Vanderbilt and Fulton Street. DOT is going to be there to solicit comments. We have to ask DOT to study the closing of that slip because the impact on traffic from Gates Avenue being forced onto Vanderbilt in that very short block is going to be very substantial. We already have blockages at that intersection without the Gates Avenue traffic. So that Gates Avenue traffic, frankly, can't be accommodated in a block that is a little bit longer than a bus stop. And that has not been studied by DOT. And so we're asking DOT to actually study it, hopefully prior to implementation, so that they could understand that the closing will have very substantial negative impacts on the surrounding community and further.
Thank you, John. Just to be clear, when you say they're having a meeting on Saturday, you mean Fab Fulton, correct?
No, I mean DOT.
Oh, DOT, okay. But I thought that was in conjunction with Fab. Isn't that with the Fab Alliance?
Fab is part of the whole movement to close it, but this is a DOT sponsored, I think it's 5 or 6 hours from 11 a.m. to 4 p.m., 5 hours, for folks to come up and talk about. I'm not quite sure how it's being organized.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I think we're talking about the same meeting. You're right. So it is DOT, but I think Fab is a co-sponsor for it. Okay, so we're talking about the same meeting. Yeah.
Yes.
So thank you for that point. And I also remind everyone that this meeting is taking place, and I would encourage everyone who has the availability to please join. John, to come back to your point, which is a valid one, I've actually had a conversation and raised the exact point that you just mentioned about studying with Commissioner Bray. He and I spoke, I think about 3 Fridays ago, and I expressed to him that this was something that the community board was strongly in support of a study. I also communicated to Commissioner Bray that, along with this, we hope for better and improved lines of communication, and indicated that this is going to have a tremendous impact. And so it shouldn't just be looked at in a micro perspective, it should be more macro, and that we should look at things in a larger fashion. He agreed, he had no objections. And so I'm waiting to hear what his responses are. We'll definitely follow up. But to your direct point, yes, I did a great point, and I did speak to Commissioner Bray as well.
So what we're going to ask for is for him to do a test of closing it off like they did Willoughby Street. Just put the fences up, close off the slip,
And study the traffic.
And study it.
Yep.
Before you actually go and spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to close it off. Because Chair Singletary, that's not going to work. There's too much traffic on Gates Avenue to fit in that short block between Gates and Fulton Street on Vanderbilt Avenue. It just is.
Yeah, and you should, I mean, you're not you, but everyone should be aware. I did ask that at the conclusion of the study, if that could be reported out in full detail, nothing left, to our Transportation and Public Safety Committee, so that we could, learn the findings as opposed to just getting an FYI. So I'm hopeful, I'm optimistic that that level of a communication will take place with the committee.
Thank you for that.
Any other agenda items or topics that we should discuss before we move into the agenda from the committee? All right, hearing none, I'm going to move into agenda item number 5, committees for action. First committee up for action. Only committee up for action is the land use. I'll turn it over to the chair, Mr. Carlton Gordon.
Thank you very much, Chair Lenny. Just before I begin, first there was a request from the committee, and I guess I have to transmit the committee our request over to you, to have our council person, one of our council persons, Lincoln Wrestler, appear at either a future meeting of the committee meeting of the Landmarks Land Use, or before the full board. So just wanted to transmit that over to you, that we would like to have Lincoln Wrestler come and appear at one of our meetings. Okay, now we're over to our meeting itself, and I wish to thank again the work that Karen Johnson did in taking minutes on this one. A lot of work on this one, and we thank her for that. I also thank the work of our co-chairs, Daughtry Christoffen and Irene Jen. Okay, we have 3 items to our Landmark Preservation Commission application, certificates of appropriate applications. First one is 113 St. James Place in Clinton Hill. And basically the application is to do some work at the rear, so expanding the rear of the property, so that it'll be it's going to be a 2-story rear addition. And we looked at it and basically found that the work was compatible, even though it's at the rear. It could be seen from Green Avenue, so it had to be taken a look at. And we found that the work was good. And we also have support. We received letters of support from the Citizens for Responsible Neighborhood Planning of Clinton Hill / Fort Greene. We received support from, we received letters of support also from the Society for Clinton Hill and the Fort Greene Association. We liked it, and we voted for it 11-0. 1 abstention in favor of the application. The next one is 100 Pierrepont Street in the Brooklyn Heights district neighborhood. Now this one we did also favored, and we did receive, I was trying to say is that the Brooklyn Heights Association did review it and did like it. It's basically work that's going to be done at the front of the property for refurbishing the brownstone, doing stucco work, doing work along let's see what else we have here. Yes. We have, yes, we have work that's being done at for stucco. That's what I was looking for stucco at the front as well. There's nice finishing. We're going to do some work for additional planters, additional front work throughout the property. Let's see what else we have. Yes, and they're going to, like I said, resurface. We're going to resurface existing brownstone. We liked it and we voted for it. 12-0-0 in favor. The third one is in the Wallabout Historic District, and we usually don't get from there, is at 108 Vanderbilt Avenue. The application was to restore much of the front and the alley side of this building. It can be seen from alley, front, as well as rear. It's an unusual, very large, old-fashioned building that's, all our properties are old-fashioned, but this one in particular, a large one with portico. They want to do work on the portico, which we like. They wanted to address the years of neglect that has happened at this particular property. They're going to replace windows, windows that are compatible with the LPC. They're doing some work, also wood. The windows will be out of wood, wood framing. There'll be metal work also as well at the front and throughout the building as well. They're restoring the portico, and they're also doing work on the brick face. And they also want to do some work where they'll be using a very firm type of let's say lumber or wood that'll be done at the front as well, which will take out the rotted parts and restore the property. On this one, we liked it and we voted for this one 11-0-0. So we voted for all in favor, almost unanimously on all three applications, and we ask for your support.
Thank you, Mr. Gordon. As been echoed by the chair, if you look at the report, you'll see that there was no opposition to any of the items that were listed. And so unless there's an objection, I'd like to entertain a motion for the committee's recommendation for all three items that were presented this evening. Ms. Fibers, second by Mr. Meyer. Is there any discussion on the motion? Ms. Allegrini?
Carlton, thank you for that. On 100 Pierrepont Street, is there any photo of what the facade will look like after is it going to be, it's hard to tell from the work that's going to be done whether there's going to be any difference in the appearance.
Nothing substantially different. We see, when we review the applications, we see the proposed, let's say, a rendering. We'll say it's a rendering of what the work will look like. I don't know if Taya could bring it up and maybe scroll through some of the proposed, but you'll see somewhere in there there should be a proposed render, a general proposed rendering. I think this one, I think, is that it? Or I think that's the one. I think that's the one. Yeah. There's a proposed rendering and it looked good.
Oh, so again, on the left, what I'm looking at on the left, I think that's the one on the left. I think it's the one on the left. Yeah. And the one on the right is existing.
Existing, yeah. I think that's
so
right.
There's really no real difference in the appearance.
No,
there's very little difference.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, it's we again, and also again to emphasize, Brooklyn Heights Association reviewed that proposal as well. They liked it. So if it's that's a big point in their favor.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Any other discussion? Taya, is there a deadline on when this goes before LPC?
I'm not aware. I don't know if
Yeah, that's why
Taya
I
has
asked
that.
Taya. Yeah, Taya.
Yeah.
Taya.
Hello, no, there is not. They're waiting for the board's recommendation.
All right, so just to remind everyone, this recommendation is gonna go before the full board at our next general meeting, and then after we vote on that, we'll send it to LPC. And I would just say in advance, it may be helpful, Taya, as you had today, the same slide, so that should questions like this come up, we'll be prepared as you are for this one. So thank you.
Chair Singletary, the executive committee is welcome to approve the certificate of appropriateness. The two items that will come before the full board are the Board of Standards and Appeals recommendation and the Public Design Commission. But these three are only certificates of appropriateness.
You're absolutely right. We're not required to do so, but given the fact that these are three items that are vastly different throughout the district, and there is no harm in doing so, and they're landmarks preservation items, I would just like to move forward with having the committee, the full board, have a chance to see and take a vote on it.
Okay.
Yeah, but thank you.
So let's not ask Taya before we, Taya, is there usually LPC usually has a pretty harsh deadline. Did they tell us the deadline that they have before? Because usually they have they have their own conference and they have a deadline before the applicant.
Yeah, that's the
must
question
then
I
go
just
back to
asked. I
present.
thought the response from Taya was no.
That's
Yeah,
right.
I just want to be sure. Yeah.
Yeah, so we're
Their
triple
reviews
sure.
are
The
every
answer is no.
Tuesday. Yeah, we're good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So should we be voting on it then if the full board is going to vote on them?
Well, yeah, there's nothing
Yeah.
So listen, let me be clear about this. We will vote tonight and we can vote on it. I'm asking that we take the additional step,
Okay,
since they are so vastly within different parts of the district, and report to the full board that this is happening.
thank you.
Okay. All right. We just don't lose our chance to make sure that our findings are reported to the Landmark Preservation Commission.
And so, Carlton, I think given that we've asked that question 3 different ways and the answer is still no, I think you can sleep good tonight. We got you.
Oh, thank you. Okay.
All right. So with that, I'll call the question. All in favor, please raise your hand or say aye for the committee's recommendation.
Aye.
Opposed, please follow the same protocol. Abstentions, please follow the same protocol. Thank you.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Ms. Peterson.
I'm sorry. Good evening. Sorry about that. Say that.
Ms. Peterson?
Yeah, Denise, we can't hear
We
you.
were voting on
Ms. Peterson?
tonight.
Yeah, Ms. Peterson, could you turn your camera off so that your audio comes through a little clearer, please?
Okay, I think it's probably in the building where I am, perhaps.
Actually,
Let me
right now you're good. Right now you're good.
It's better.
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry for interrupting. I wasn't sure on what the vote was for,
So
because I had.
the vote was for item number 5, committees for action on the agenda for land use committee. So it's on the agenda, item number 5.
It's still
Okay.
kind of choppy here. I'm sorry. Oh,
So I'm going to move forward to
okay.
committee.
Okay, let me try to come back on. Thanks.
Denise,
Go ahead.
Denise,
Uh-huh.
hold on.
Okay.
Don't go anywhere. And let me go to agenda item number 6, committees to report,
Okay.
and ask you to present the report for the Economic Development and Employment Committee, because Mr. Flanoy could not make this evening's meeting.
Okay, so the Economic and Employment Committee one will be meeting on Tuesday, April the 5th. And if I'm not mistaken, there was a report that was already given at the last meeting. And so I'm sorry, I'm in the middle of three different things. And so can I just come back to that? Because I still feel like I'm moving in and out. Can I come back to that in a second? I'm sorry, Mr. Chairperson.
Before I say yes, I'm not sure what there's to come back to. You just said you have nothing to report and your meeting is on April 5th. I think that's sufficient, but
April,
yeah,
right,
absolutely.
April
You can
5th.
come back.
Okay. All right. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you for that wonderful report.
Okay.
I know we have the Finance and Personnel Committee as the next agenda item, but I don't know that we have anything to report on, but I'll check with Mr. Jordan.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Singletary. No, I reported on our last meeting, which was in February, about the budgets, and we will be meeting again in April, probably to finalize the budget when we get the final numbers from OMB, and then we will present that to the full board for their approval. That's about all that I have.
All right, so before everybody looks at me like I'm crazy, the reason there's nothing to report on is that we're still evaluating the results from our meeting that the Finance and Personnel Committee held on Thursday. There's some questions about some of the ballots. And so once that's been resolved, we will definitely report out to the entire board on the results. Next committee to report is Health, Environment, and Social Services, Mr. Smith.
Good evening, everybody. We had a meeting back at the beginning of the month. It seems like it was quite some time ago with the way this month is structured. It was March 2nd. We had a really nice meeting. It was very much a working meeting, but we had a fantastic update from Ms. Anadu, who provided a great presentation on the state of COVID-19. She's picked that up from Mr. Newmark, our public member, who had to unfortunately step away from our committee for a few months for a personal reason. So on the issue of the pandemic, things were definitely trending in the right direction, but there were some areas of concern that are really well summarized in the PowerPoint, which is accessible via the public drive, and disparities between neighborhoods, between different communities. It was a really good presentation. And then we heard 9 liquor licenses, which Ms. McKnight covered at the general board meeting, and they were all approved. There was nothing really notable to say about them here. Beyond that, we discussed potentially writing a letter in expressing concern about the mayor's plan to cut back on composting, but we were advised we needed to draft an action report as a committee before we held the vote. So and some of the members wanted to think about it some more too. So we made a motion to table, and we're currently going to work on an action report for that. Otherwise, I'm excited to announce that we're moving forward with our plans to hold a health fair in the summer of this year. And thank you to Mr. Singletary for the partnership, and we're going to have a really fantastic event. We're planning to hold it in either Fort Greene Park or Commodore Barry Park, and invite a number of different service providers, offer some really great services, and make sure that we have a really great quality event. Latrell Masso, who has been a frequent attender of our committee, has been the person really taking the lead in this regard, and I'm absolutely confident it's going to be a smashing success given the extreme amount of commitment that she has already shown to putting this into action. So we'll be discussing this further at our next meeting, which is first Wednesday in April, where we'll also have a presentation from Mr. Chaim Gross about Heat Smart, Cool Smart Brooklyn, a solar project, as well as a New York City Health and Hospitals update from the Cumberland facility. Happy to take any questions on my report, but thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Next committee to report is Park and Recreations, Ms. Sala Gringer.
Good evening, and thank you, Chair Singletary. Thank you also to my co-chair, Andrew Aswecki, and to Lenny Levinton, who took our minutes at our meeting last week at March 21st. We had our annual Friends Groups meeting, and this time we heard updates. We didn't hear detailed information, just updates, because we had heard from them before. We heard from Brooklyn Bridge Park, Friends of Hillside Dock Park, Friends of Commodore Barry Park, Friends of Fort Greene, the Fort Greene Tennis Association, the Friends of South Oxford Park. And I think through the good news is live events are coming back in the parks this year after COVID interruptions. The big issues continue to be the lack of bathrooms and the need to refurnish turf. We heard from two recent additions that we've heard from briefly before on behalf of Brooklyn Pickleball and the New York City Bike Polo Club. Both of these groups are very much interested. They're itinerant at the moment, and they're very much interested in finding a permanent place for them to play their sports. And we spent a good deal of time talking to them, offering suggestions, and really the need to work together and to network to try to find spaces and work with the Parks Department and Partnerships for Parks to try to identify spaces where they could play their sports. They both seem very popular, and they have a lot of people interested, and so we'll see what happens. And pickleball, which I really was not familiar with, is, although it seems like there are mostly young people in this group, but they mentioned that this is particularly good for older people like myself, as it's a sort of a combination of tennis and some other sports, but it doesn't involve a lot of movement. So it was a very lively and informative session.
Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you.
Next committee to report is Transportation and Public Safety, Sid Meyer.
Good evening, everyone. Our meeting was on March 17th, and although I was a little bit late to it, that John Quinn chaired for the first part, and John Quinn also took the notes. We've added that at each one of our meetings now, we go over the crash data for our district to look and see if there are any trends, to see if we can point the DOT or who needs to in the right direction to try to do some preventative. And Nicole Murray, who's now a member of the committee, kindly has agreed to do that. We also had DOT for the first time in a fairly long time, showed up at our meeting and agreed to, she will be at the DOT, not Emily, who represents DOT, but DOT will be at least at our next few meetings. She went over issues concerning ramp construction and some other, and street repaving and a few other things. We raised with her, she raised that right now there are 32 traffic, which are red light and speed cameras in the CB2, and citywide they're going to be adding more, and that's something the city wants to take over the responsibility and not have to go back to the state each and every time. So hopefully that's something we discussed. We also raised with her, and we expect her to come back to discuss the BQE, the change of the BQE, what's happening going forward with the BQE, the design with the weight and a few other issues. And in my prep for the meeting, Taya raised with me that there are other districts that are using other kinds of signage and barriers for open streets. So I actually did some research, and I found out about Willoughby Street, and I'd like to show you what I found out, and I presented to the committee. Taya, can I have the first one, the open street one? This is the city open streets thing that they put out. And you'll see that it talks about open street, something called a limited access, local access, and full closure and full closure schools. Now, you'll note that the limited access ones have a sign that say roads closed to through traffic, and he is correctly pointing out. And for the full closure ones, they use the universal do not enter except bikes. And when they have that kind of sign, supposedly you're not even allowed to go park on the street. That is the universally recognized do not enter sign. And that raises issues. Now let me go to the second, the second one. This is what you have. The second one, no, the second one that talks about Willoughby Street, that shows the signs at Willoughby Street. Here, this is Willoughby Street. Willoughby Street is a limited access street, but they're using the signs that they use are the do not enter signs. And there's a real problem with accessoride, deliveries, all the car hailing services who refuse to go into the street because of the use of the non-standard sign that says do not enter. Now, we raised this with DOT, and DOT said, yes, they noticed this. They have not gotten back to us on whether or not they will go to, and this is not the issue of open streets for this block, but it's simply an issue that even their own information says that the signage that they're using is incorrect. And whether they will recognize that, I do not know. Hopefully they'll report back to us on it. I can tell you that there are other issues about open streets that go, including noise that's created when the barriers are moved. We've recommended that they put some sort of roller so that it's not dragged along. And I know that at least one of our board members has been raising that to me every once in a while. And that is something that we've asked them to go back and look at. Whether they will actually do that, I don't know. We will have to wait and see. And that's my report. And I'm happy to take any questions. Open streets, the issue of open streets will be brought back to the committee. That meeting is on April 14th. I am not scheduled to be in the United States on April 14th, but I do intend to call in.
So are you doing transportation studies abroad? Like, what is that? I mean,
I'm going to be in Poland.
good luck, be safe, best of safe
Thank
travels.
you.
Next committee to report, Education and Cultural Affairs.
Good evening. Thank you. At our last committee meeting, we had a very deep data dive with the Citizens Committee for Children that monitors data on community district levels, borough levels, etc. Their data is on the well-being of young people. They compare different community districts. Some of the data can be by zip code. And it really takes some sitting at the computer and diving into some of this information. One of the biggest takeaways for me and probably the committee is that there are many low-income people in the community that can't access early childhood care. And we're talking about before school, before the 3K and the UPK, the early years care, and they can't access it because even the limited amount of fee that they would have to pay based on their income that they can't afford. So in the past, we had thought, well, we needed more preschool centers, Head Start, daycare, but a lot of it has to do with the funding. So we're going to be looking at this more, and this will get somehow into the Statement of District Needs Report as we delve into this and can succinctly make a request. There's also advocacy on the statewide level for some of these numbers to be changed. But actually, very interestingly, as we had voted on to have a youth council that would be part of our committee, but also look at all of the issues or many of the issues in the district, 3 of our 4 young people reported on what issues they are studying and will report on. And the 2 that are particularly interesting, I think, to members of the executive committee, one young person is looking at homelessness its causes, the services, the facilities in the district, and so on. And he would like to speak to adults who are involved in this issue and so on, to get a deeper picture and understand the issues so that recommendations could be made. The other young person talked about young people in NYCHA housing and the opportunities for them to have youth development and leadership opportunities so that they can advocate for changes in NYCHA, such as the way the facilities are maintained, the funding, the trash. And she's a young person who wants to talk to other young people, wants to connect to the tenant leaders in some of the developments and so on. So these are very energetic and articulate young people who have a lot to say and a lot to learn. So I'm hoping that anyone who wants to connect to some of these people can contact me or the district office so that there can be a dialogue. And I know that the young people will be presenting to our committee in May, and I'm wondering how the full board could hear their voices, maybe in June or maybe in another way. That's my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Betty.
Chair Singleton, may I please say something in response to Betty? Or no, sorry.
Emily, you can't because you're not an exec committee member.
Oh, sorry.
But don't hang up, because when I go to open session, you can mention your point there. All right, perfect. Thank you, Betty. We'll try to see how we can be creative and provide assistance in the office so that the full board knows what's taking place, and then to the extent that we can try to see if the office working with Mark, we might be able to get the youth together, or maybe even working with other board members like Emily to see how we can connect that as well. And then I also remind that the 57th Assembly District Leader, Shaquana Boykins, is also active within the youth, and she may be another resource that can help us get that collaboration. So I don't think we're short on resources to get the collaboration kicked off, even if we just rely on other board members. Again, I highlight Emily because I know the work that she does, but we should be able to get that kicked off. So great report, great suggestion.
We appreciate it. Thank you.
No problem. I got everybody. So now we're moving into agenda item number 7, the chairperson's report. I just want to do a brief reminder. I don't want to spend all day. I am, clearly from the time that everyone on the board elected me to serve as chair from the very first year, and even to now, as I thank each of you for allowing and trusting me as the service chair, I've always been about trying to disseminate information and look at things differently. If many of you recall, one of the first 2 things I asked to do was to create, these ad hoc committees. And so ad hoc committees were able to be a tool that allowed us to think differently and cover items that sometimes don't make on the agenda, or sometimes garner a lot of discussion and passion, and we just don't have a way to focus on that. In that same context, per our bylaws, no chair or co-chairs given the purview under the current bylaws to create their own ad hoc committees and go out and create subcommittees. So that's number 1. I ask that everyone, if you please have those thoughts, run them by me so that we can follow the bylaws appropriately and bring it to the full board for a vote, because that's how an ad hoc committee or any special committee as it's described in the bylaws is created. So that's just more a reminder, no chastisement, no complaint, just a reminder. Number 2, I had the opportunity to meet with representatives from MTA, and starting sometime around, give me a second, I want to be accurate when I make this response, sometime around April until the 4th quarter, probably early fall, there will be construction taking place at the Clark Street Station on the R train, the R line. And so if you're familiar with Montague, right at the corner of Montague and Clinton, the church, if you're looking down Montague, on the right side of the street is the church. And, they're neighbors to us. They've allowed us to hold meetings there in the past. But from the corner, almost to maybe a third of the block, there's no parking currently. So that's restricted. There's no parking there. Or at least the signs say no parking. Let me say it that way. The signs say no parking. Directly across the street, thank you, Taya. Directly across the street, as Taya moves her mouse over to the left side of the picture, there is also an area for cars to park. Well, if you look at the same picture that Taya has posted on the screen now, from the crosswalk to almost the top of where that last vehicle is, that area will be shut down, and MTA will have barricades up to allow for the construction and the enhancements to the station. So the construction team is going to make sure that there will be no parking on either side. There will be work taking place on that station 7 days a week, and pretty much from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. There will be some considerations on the weekends so that they're not causing any disturbance for the residents that are there. And MTA has made a commitment that they will work with the local businesses so that they're not being impacted. That on the morning that we met with the MTA representatives, it was Andrew Inglesby, who is the Government and Community Relations Assistant Director for MTA Transit, as well as Joe O'Donnell, who's Director of Public Affairs for Capital Construction. Myself, Kate Chura, who's Executive Director of the Montague Street Business Improvement District, other community representatives and stakeholders, as well as Council Member Lincoln Ressler in person. We had a series of questions, and I think all of us walked away with questions answered and an optimism that MTA will commit to the improvements and the traffic calming and the collaboration of working with the bid. In addition, the Clark Street station will be completely open and for public use, which is not that far away, at the same time that this construction is about to start, because they can't have two construction projects at the same time. And so, for example, if the Clark Street station ends on the 1st, then the construction for this will begin on the 2nd. And so they've made that commitment. They're finishing up now. They're just doing more cosmetics, but the Clark Street station will be opening up shortly. And so as they complete one project, they're moving on to the next. So that's my second item. The third item I want to mention really kind of flows into the other committee business portion of the agenda, is the MTA Transit has asked for a letter of support from the community board for the U.S. Department of Transportation RAISE grants. And so essentially what this is, give you the Cliff Notes version. This grant allows MTA to make improvements for any kind of capital projects. What the MTA would like to do is for the next project that's on their list, which is the Clausen Avenue train station, right at the corner of Lafayette, which is the G train station. They have money set aside and the project's already been signed off to make that station ADA compliant. They want to use a portion of this money to substitute that project so that the MTA can take the dollars that they've set aside, the capital dollars, and invest that in another project. And so given the support of this board for ADA access throughout all the transportation venues that sit within our district, and quite frankly, through New York, I see no objection why I should not sign that and move forward. But I wanted to bring it to the executive committee to see if there were any comments or concerns, but I have every intent of signing the letter so that the Clausen Avenue station can receive the ADA support and the improvements that it so rightly deserves and needs. So with that, let me pause. I see Barbara, you have your hand up. You have a question.
Right, I wanted to find out how much money we're talking about. And will your letter reflect that it's under the understanding that these funds will be used for ADA purposes at another station?
That's what the letter says, yes.
Okay, and how much money are we talking about?
I don't know that there's
Roughly.
an actual dollar amount in there. Let me check. So while I look for that, let me move on to Jessica, and I'll come back to you, Barbara, with an answer for
Thanks.
this one.
I just want to say, I think it's great. I'm super supportive. And I'm just curious, do you happen to know if this grant works like it's kind of one station at a time? Like in this case, we're applying so that they can make the Clarkson Avenue stop ADA compliant. Like what about any other stops? Like could we go through this process multiple times, or is that for a discussion for a later time?
So let me come back to Barbara and I'll answer you. So Barbara,
Okay.
the letter does not state a specific dollar amount. So I don't know in the request that came from MTA. Jessica,
But there is the understanding that whatever funds are not used for the Clayson Avenue will now be used for ADA improvements at another station.
No, the
No.
dollars are only going to be set aside to supplement the project for Clawson Avenue only.
Oh, in other words, there wasn't enough money for it.
I can't speak to that because I don't know the intricacies of the project or the way the grant project works. What I can tell you is the specific request that was submitted to us through New York City Transit was that we would provide a component, which is a letter of support from the community for this grant, for the dollars which were not been specified, to specifically be used in support of the project that has already been approved to include an ADA and improvement access at Clawson Avenue on the G line. That's all the facts that I have.
Okay. It would just be good to know that we could use those funds for improvement elsewhere. Because it
Yeah,
sounds like.
I don't get the impression
funds-
that those funds are going to be used elsewhere from this grant. I think this grant is
No,
targeted.
not from the grant.
direct.
Maybe I'm not understanding it appropriately, but were funds already earmarked by DOT for the ADA improvements at the Clayson Avenue station?
Larson.
So I think when you say DOT, I think you mean New York City
MTA.
Transit, or you talking about the U.S. Department of Transportation?
No, I'm talking about city,
So you're talking about New York City Transit. And
right,
you're asking that they have dollars set aside for Clawson Avenue.
right,
The answer is-
already,
The answer is yes.
okay. But now that money is going to be paid for by the state, the feds, instead of the city.
They want, as Andy Inglesby explained it to me, and let me make an illustration. There is, for this illustration, let's say that DOT set aside $100 million for the Clawson Avenue project. And through communication that New York City Transit has made, they're received information that they can get $50 million
Right.
through a grant. What they like to do is take the $50 million that's coming from this grant and apply it to the Clawson Avenue project. And as Andy communicated verbally, this is not in a letter, they would take that $50 million and apply it to another project for another
Perfect.
station improvement.
All right, for ADA purposes.
I don't know if it's for ADA purposes.
Oh.
What I'm saying is it's for an improvement. What the
Okay.
improvement is, I don't have that level of detail.
All right, well, is there some way to put that in the letter that we would hope that would be used for other ADA improvements at other stations?
We can consider that.
Okay, that would be great. Thank you.
Jessica, back to your question.
That was pretty much my question, whether we could do this later for ADA compliant. But I see the webpage today that you pulled up was really helpful because it's 1.5 billion. It's a lot of money, but that will go quickly. So I'm just sort of curious if that came up at all. Like, oh, while we maybe can get it, are there other stations we want to try to encourage them to apply for?
Yeah, I mean, what I know is that there's a strong desire from New York City Transit to make improvements to stations.
Yeah.
What I don't have information on is whether those improvements all include ADA access. That's the
Okay,
piece
fair.
that's the piece that I'm not clear on. That wasn't communicated verbally or written.
Okay.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
No problem. Mr. Gordon?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On the the R train, I want to get back to the R train, which you were talking about. I just wanted to clarify that the work's being done on the R train is at the Court Street station, which hooks into the Borough Hall station. So that, and also I just heard this afternoon on television news that because of this work, apparently, there will be a substantial disruption of R train service coming from Brooklyn into Manhattan. I'm not totally clear as to how the NTA is doing it, but apparently they're running it, I guess, right into Court Street, not any further. But that seems to be part of the, let's say, part of the work as well. But it's at the Court Street station. I just wanted to clarify that.
So let me be really specific. Maybe I said this too quickly.
Yeah.
The improvements that are going to take place will be at the entrance of Montague and Clinton.
That's the elevator.
Right.
Yeah,
on the R
that
line.
goes down to the plant. Yeah, that goes down
right.
to the Court Street station.
Right, on the
platform.
R line. While this is
Yeah, on the R
also
line.
taking place, the Court Street entrance, which is what you referenced, that's closer to Borough Hall, that will be open. And
That's open, yeah.
As often as people can use that entrance without having any delay of entering this train station to get to the R train, it is encouraged. But the specific work and the specific enhancements that will take place and the removal of parking is specifically for the entrance that is at Clinton and Montague.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Meyer?
And this may be off topic, but did they indicate whether or not we're going to be getting something on York Street soon?
No.
Thank you.
Sure. So just before I conclude my report, I do want to take a moment to say hello and welcome everyone. If you have not already met Yvette Richardson. Yvette Richardson is a new member of Community Board 2. I think Yvette, if you would just come off mute for a minute and give us the Cliff Notes versions of what you bring to the board, like your daytime profession, and then what neighborhood do you live in?
Okay. Thank you, Chair. So my name is Yvette Richardson. I am a native Brooklynite, always lived in Clinton Hill, still live in Clinton Hill area. I'm a registered engineer in New York, New Jersey, and some other states down south. And and I also co-own an architecture and engineering firm that does work regionally in New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania. So I'm really excited about being involved with the community board. I regret not being involved earlier on because I'm really enjoying, my involvement in the discussion, because I really feel that I'm able to use my skills and knowledge towards something I'm very passionate about, which is, our neighborhood. So I don't know if I got everything covered there.
You do, and you have everything covered. Thank you. I appreciate you allowing me to put you on the spot. I will tell you that, it's never too late to be on the community board. There's always a lot of work. You happen to be on the best community board in New York City. And when you saw Daughtry Christophin do those hands motions, she wasn't trying to do a backflip. I think she was just happy that you're on and that you're an engineer. So welcome to Community Board 2.
Thank you. And can I
She's on our committee and is working hard.
Exactly. I was going to say, I'm also a member of the land use committee. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. Let me move on to the next item on the agenda. It's item number 9, community forum. So just so we're clear, this is where non-exec committee members listen to comments that are coming from the community, and maybe there are items that require new business. But this is where we, trying to give an opportunity for individuals to share information. And at the top of the meeting, Emily wanted to comment on something from Ms. Fabish, and I asked her if she would hold her comments. So this would be a great spot for Emily if she wanted to share those thoughts. But let me start off with Mr. Du.
Oh, thank you, Chair Singletary. Again, I just want to follow up on the comments that I made earlier. We have an issue now in Community Board 2, and I believe throughout the city, where DOT implements major projects that have major impact on the community without coming to the community board. So the open streets project, the project with the restaurants did not come before the community board. These projects are having major impacts in the community. The open streets project in specific with the presentation that Mr. Meyer made is very important because ADA has not been taken into consideration. There is no discussion of how the folks who are in wheelchairs that need accessoride are supposed to get the vital services that they need. And DOT was sued by ADA several years ago, and as a result of that settlement, 75% of the sidewalk ramps in the city of New York are going to have to be upgraded to meet ADA compliance standards within the next 10 to 15 years at a cost of $1.5 billion. We need DOT to respect the fact that the community board actually has a voice that allows the community to share their issues and concerns before projects are implemented. Whether or not they like our vote is a different issue. They need to understand, the community needs to be able to understand what's happening, and DOT needs to understand the impacts on the community, which has not happened for the recent year with these new projects.
Thank you, Mr. Dew. Once again, you know, I've said this jokingly, but it bears repeating, and it is seriousness involved in my statement. But Mr. Dew has always served as and continues to serve as that voice of moral conscience sometimes to help us, remember the things that need to take place. And so, John, thank you for that. There's nothing you said that I think anyone disagrees with, and we'll continue to push DOT to be more collaborative, and not just in a way that almost serves as a rubber stamp, but really a true collaboration with a partner agency such as Community Board. So thank you. Any other comments, questions? Emily, are you still on?
I am. I'm just a little mobile, but super focused. And as always, thank you, John Dew, for your focus on accessibility. So yes, and I put a comment in the, I put a note in the comments, but just to Betty's point, and Taya, of course, we'll have it at the ready, but there's a young woman named Samantha who is doing an amazing presentation on data in our community board in the district area. And it would be worthwhile, I think, for them to just come and attend that. Samantha is amazing at visualizing data and just really helping people understand some of the nuances of what's going on. So it just feels like it could be a great partnership. So Betty would love to see more of that, happy to help, but also would love for them to, attend the meeting where Samantha is going to present. That's it. Thank you for the time.
Yeah, I think that was Betty saying thank you.
My understanding is that's the April meeting, the full board meeting in April.
Yes, I believe that's it.
Okay, I'll make sure.
And I think Taya just dropped it in the chat as well. Thank you, Betty. I look forward to meeting those young people.
Great, thank you.
Are there any other items for community forum or new business? Hearing none, I'm moving to item number 10 for adjournment. Motion by Mr. Lasawecki, second by Ms. Fibers. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, everybody get home, get safe, have a good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night, everyone.